Shotcallers. I am here with Todd Gongwer. And Todd, I actually met in 2012. He came and spoke to our business, and it was a real honor. In fact, I have my signed book and copy of Lead for God's Sake here. Todd is a best-selling author, speaker, and teacher on leadership and cultural development. Todd has spent the last decade working with some of the most successful coaches, teams, business leaders, and educators in America. His principles have been embraced by countless leaders, including coaches and athletes in championship programs in the NCAA, NBA, MLB, NFL, and stories of profound impact of Todd's message have been featured on ESPN, the magazine, ESPN.com, and Bleacher Report and Forbes.com. Todd, welcome. It is such an honor to hear from you again and to see you. How are things going?
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me first and foremost, Dennis. And it's awesome to be able to see and talk to you, connect with you again, and appreciate the opportunity. Things have been great. Have continued to be really never a dull moment in this journey for sure. So it's been great.
Well, it's always awesome when you go through somebody's bio. I mean, just talking about all the different teams and all the different organizations, business, colleges, all these things. It's just such an honor to see. How do you even fit it on a couple pages is just amazing. So good for you. I'm glad things are really happening.
Thanks.
So
Yeah, cool.
let's get started on Lead for God's Sake. I read the book and it's very inspirational to me. As you know, you came here. I bought one for all my teams. We were fortunate enough to get autographs and everything. Tell me, Todd, what's the story behind the story? I mean, that's how did you get to the book aspect of things?
Yeah. So for me, it was really cool, and always in hindsight's always 20/20. Obviously,
Sure.
we can look back on our lives oftentimes, and no matter what we've gone through, when we reflect, typically we can see those even the toughest moments that were the equipping moments in our lives. And so I go back and growing up as a part of a family business, working at a really young age and really being a part of the family business, all aspects, throughout my, probably starting at 10 years old all the way through my teens. And then, and so really developing a passion for the business world early on. And then at the same time being passionate about sports. So with that, I loved all sports, played most sports, but then eventually kind of narrowed in on, being from Indiana, of course, narrowed in on basketball.
Right.
And that was kind of my first love. And so fast forward then into the 90s, where, was kind of a crazy decade, but I had the opportunity to kind of run parallel in both the business and the sports world. I was an assistant college basketball coach during that whole time, for an NAIA school. Being an assistant at that level, I had to keep my day job. So I was still running, in the business world.
Right.
And so it was crazy because I was about killing myself with hours and different, my pursuits and things like that. But also, that time out of necessity more than anything else really drew me into a deep, almost an obsessive study on the topic of leadership and cultural development. Like what is this, and how do the great cultures do it? What's the secret to these, to leadership dynamics, the most successful ones? And because I could apply it in sports and business, it was a tiring but a great equipping opportunity through the 90s and then into the early 2000s. And then I eventually, when I stepped away from sports, also had the opportunity to kind of lead a leadership cultural development process for a private equity owned company.
Okay.
Which is about a $250 million company. And then, so I was putting all these philosophies kind of that I started to put on paper, practicing them and really developing them out further. And then eventually we were bought by our largest competitor, which was a public company. And so I was able to serve as a senior executive for that team for a few more years, leading up to the time where I really, finally felt called to write this book. Never intended it to be a parable. Sure. Thought it was going to be step 1, step 2, step 3. And, fortunately, God had a different plan. And I was terrible. I could not write the other way. For whatever reason, nothing came out. Felt called to start over. And when I did that, this story just started pouring out. And I tell people it was amazing because I really didn't have the plot of the characters figured out at all. And until kind of the story just kind of happened in front of me. So it's a really, really cool experience. And then as it gained popularity and just really took off organically, it became clearer and clearer, especially as the people that were getting a hold of it and were starting to reach out and being impacted and opportunities were open up. It became clearer and clearer that this was not something that I could have ever orchestrated on my own. So God really did a cool thing through that whole experience. So
I really love the fact on your Twitter and all your tweets and whatnot. I love that you can just see how God speaks through you for some of the leadership and whatnot. And it's really just awesome. Sometimes, you know, during my work day, it'll pop up on my phone and I'll kind of go and look at it. And it's just, they're very inspirational and very well focused. So.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a great encouragement, Dennis. I really appreciate that because that's something that for the vast majority, you know, there's kind of an 80-20 rule, but I really feel like there's such a deep need for positive truth. You know, in Philippians is whatever's true, noble, pure, lovely, praiseworthy, excellent, you know, admirable, all those things. We need more of that in social media. And so I really take it seriously, those opportunities to, you know, just be an encouragement to people in some way, shape, or form. So I appreciate hearing that from you. That's an encouragement back to me to know that somebody out there feels that way also and is encouraged by that.
I think we're fortunate because that whole mix of, and that leads to another question, but that whole mix of, you know, having God with the leadership and sports, three main things in a lot of our lives, or have been in a lot of our lives, but the way it intertwines, that's just awesome work. To me, it's just awesome work. So I give you kudos for that. So
thank you.
I do have a question. When did the light bulb go off before leadership and sports? Because I have it a lot. I listened to your story multiple times, and I have that a lot in my business. It's funny how sports and leadership, how they kind of intertwine. And when did it click that a lot of the things that helped me lead as an athlete or as a coach also work in business and all of that? When did that click for you? Was it before the book or?
Yeah, you know what, it really was. And it's interesting you asked that because I can remember it was probably 6 or 7 years into my coaching day, you know, and this would have been actually into the later 90s. And I mentioned to you that I'd kind of gone on this obsessive journey of really studying leadership. And, you know, as I was reading a lot of these leadership books, it was funny because I was reading, you know, books that coaches had written because, you know, whether it was Krzyzewski or back then Rick Pitino, you know, a lot of Vince Lombardi, Tom Landry. I mean, like there's a lot of great ones, but it seemed like all the coaches were writing these books because businesses were really, really eating that up. Well, for me, here I was, you know, deep into the business world, but I was also in the sports world. And for me, it was kind of like, I just remember one time actually kind of having a little bit of an epiphany, like, you know, there's so many parallels, but the business world brings in all of these sports experts, right? You know, coaches, but the sports world at that time anyways, was not tapping in to the business world because the same is true. Right. There is just as much, you know, I used to tell people, I mean, like, look, if you got 250,000 employees, which some of these CEOs are responsible for, there's a ton that a team of 15 can learn from.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you got, and even these football programs have become these big businesses. And so there's a give and take. There's a mutual benefit from both worlds that one can share with the other. And so, yeah, there's no doubt for me, I mean, from 1991 to 2004 is when I was really in both worlds every day. I mean, I was at work all day, hiring people, firing people, looking at P&Ls and balance sheets, all this other stuff. And then at 3 o'clock, I was going to practice and then, you know, meeting with kids and then recruiting and then going to games and then, you know what I mean? Like whatever.
Yeah.
So, you know, just through that process over the years, it really did become very, very clear to me that, man, there's parallels that both worlds can benefit and learn from. So when I'm in the business world, I'm telling all kinds of sports stories.
Right.
Because I learn, I've been able to learn. And man, when you get to spend time around Clemson football and be around that culture, there's so much to learn. Same thing with Virginia basketball. Fortunately, both of those teams the last couple of years have had a lot of opportunities to be around not just the coaches, but the players and teams, assistant coaches and things. And man, there's a lot of great things you can learn. At the same time, there's been some businesses, a number of businesses I've been around on the other side.
Right.
That you can share with the sports teams. Like, guys, these are things you need to learn if you're going to, get to the next level. So I'm glad you asked me that, because Dennis, I just think there's so much value in the parallels on both sides. And, we need coaches that really value that aspect and understand the importance of preparing those kids. A lot of coaches understand the importance of preparing them for life,
Mm-hmm.
but there really is a shift that takes place. There's a competitiveness, but there's still a shift that takes place when you move into the business world.
Yep.
We have to do a better job of preparing kids for that.
Yep.
So tons of value there, though.
I couldn't agree more. I think that, with that, the aspect of it really should be from the coach and even the owners. You talk about professional, or all the way down to, from the owners to the coaches, all the way down the leadership role there, and then doing it in the business world. There's so many. When people ever ask me how I got good at what I did, all I did is I stopped watching ESPN for 6 hours a day when I was in high school. And then once I was in college and I decided I had to get into the real world, I switched that over and started to study business and finances. That's it. My obsession from ESPN and knowing every basketball player's height, weight. My brother would attest to this, because it's true. I literally just took that switch and made it a different topic, so to speak.
Yeah, something that would genuinely benefit you.
Yeah.
For the next 30 or 40 years, and beyond even.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, there's no doubt. No, that's great. That's great.
So now are you just teaching leadership, teaching the cultural development? Hey, do you ever look back at the leadership and what you learned back in the past in the private world, or does that affect it a lot? Or
Yeah, I think, again, when, so right now the main thing, and for a long time, I get asked to do obviously a lot of keynotes.
Sure.
And, come into both businesses and sports teams. But the one thing which I love to do, particularly with the sports teams and even athletic departments at a lot of the colleges I work with, I really, I feel like my call, I tell people from the beginning, when people ask me what I do, and I kind of describe, well, I teach leadership, I speak on the topic of leadership and culture, and they go, oh, you're a motivational speaker. And I'm just like, all I can think about is Chris Farley, motivational.
Yeah.
But I, the thing I tell them from that is that, my heart is really to be more of a transformational speaker, and not taken away from the power of motivation and the importance of motivation. You need motivation to be transformed.
Right.
But transformation is something deeper, something longer lasting, something that impacts further out. And that's really where my heart is. And so when I go out to organizations, my preference is, even though I'll come out and I'll do, if they read the book especially, I'll come out and I'll talk about leadership and influence and a lot of principles that I think can apply to anywhere, whether it's faith-based or not. These are principles that are proven over and over again. So I'll do a lot of that. But I really, really love the opportunities when the organizations give me a chance to, go a little deeper with the employees and really take them through some exercises and some things to hopefully really get them thinking deeper about what really lies at the heart of leadership. How am I impacting others through my leadership? And ultimately, again, kind of the heart and soul of the book, why do I do what I do and why am I here? What's my real purpose? And am I walking in my leadership in aligned with my true purpose in life. And, I think a lot of people are still to this day, and especially nowadays with what we're going through, people are asking that question.
Yeah.
Why am I here? What's my purpose? And they're starting to kind of freak out a little bit because it's like, oh my gosh. In a lot of cases, a lot of people, they've had the rug pulled out, beneath them. I mean, I think of all these college athletes as an example who maybe were thinking, well, my purpose is to play golf, or my purpose is to play tennis or baseball. Well, now what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's starting fresh. Now what do I do here?
Yeah. And so naturally, I think it's really, really important to help them understand that there's a foundational aspect that's way bigger than your gifts, your talents, your opportunities, and passions. Yep. And those may be a part of purpose, but there's a foundational aspect that is always going to go back to relationships. And so I really like to take folks, deeper into that concept and help them walk out, I think, with maybe a little deeper peace than just being motivated.
Yeah, that's great. And talking about transformation and how the foundation actually works with that transforming process. That's great. Is that what do you see are most of the topics that you're teaching, both sports, business, and how are we teaching our children and whatnot from some of the foundation and the principles that you see right now?
So, obviously flowing from leadership, there's different ways. You can look at it as a hierarchy, power and position status, or you can look at it as more my influence and impact. Right. And one way is all about me. The other way is about us, and so I really, that's a message that it's universal. Everybody can relate to that. And so, I love to go down that path. I talk a lot about responsibility and owning our contributions to problems. I think that's a big problem in society right now. So I think young people especially, they need to learn it, because when they turn the TV on, all they see is the blame game being played. Oh my God. And it's a dangerous, we're playing a very dangerous game with our youth when we teach them to, as soon as if you've ever been hurt, if there's ever an issue, if there's anything you're dealing with, the answer is find out who you can blame, get really, really angry, and try to get even with them. Yeah. And that's the exact opposite from a leadership standpoint of what we really should be teaching, which is, what's my contribution to the problem? If I really am going to love people, then you can't unconditionally love people unless you're willing to unconditionally forgive. Yeah. And forgiveness is such a huge part of all of our lives. And we're teaching the masses to get even, get angry, all these other things, but forgive. Right. I think those are some really important things. I teach about the character and the construction of the heart. The heart of leadership is your character. Heart's always under construction. And now more than ever, the digital media component, and I emphasize digital as, way beyond social media. And when I say digital media, I'm talking about video games, music, movies, media, and virtually everything else that, comes through this thing. Yeah. And, it's interesting because 10 years ago, and even when I came to see you guys in 2012, there probably wasn't a mention of this in that talk. Nowadays, it's become such a huge thing. When you talk about the construction of the heart, if your leadership comes from your character, then we need to pay attention to what's constructing our character and our hearts. Well, in the last 10 years, everything's changed. Nothing was more heavily or more significantly constructed in the heart than this. And again, movies, video games, videos, social media, that's all in there. Yeah. And what I try to talk to young and old alike on is, man, be careful what you're consuming. What we most consume consumes us. Yep. That's the bottom line. And so I probably take 25 to 30% of most of my talks now, even whether it's a keynote, workshop, whatever. But I would say that probably close to 30% is dealing with the effects of digital media, the agenda that is behind all of digital media, because it's always to monetize, desensitize, polarize, and often politicize. Yeah. And it doesn't matter which side you land on in terms of the fence, the reality is that's where we can all agree. There's an agenda.
Yes.
Every form of digital media wants to suck you in. That's how they make money.
Right.
They have to, and so fear, lies, over, sensationalizing and desensitizing, getting fights, polarizing. That's a very, very dangerous game we're playing. And even now, the sad thing is we're dealing with a significantly serious situation worldwide.
Right.
And how do we know where to find the truth?
Yeah.
Because the mass, 90+% of what is out there has cried wolf.
Yeah.
They've cried wolf.
Yep.
And so you don't know whether it's real or not.
Yeah. You don't know the extent of it, of what, and like you said, what to believe, because media's got the conflict, the controversy, the fear, all those different things going on. So.
And because truth has become so relative now, and it's just whatever sells, whatever draws, whatever. So I think it's really important that we communicate and start to educate this next generation. Not, I'm not trying to indoctrinate them. I of course have my own strong opinions, as I'm sure you could probably imagine, Dennis.
Yeah.
But when I'm out there doing that, I'm saying, look, because I'm in public schools, I'm everywhere. My thing is this, I'm not going to tell you how you have to think, but what we need to do is educate young people on, listen, there is an agenda here.
Yeah.
So you need to start understanding, take the time to understand where the message is coming from, what they want you to believe from their perspective.
Right.
Then you can choose how much of it you're going to consume and believe, and how much of it you're going to go, you know what, I don't even want to hear it, because you're just spinning stuff.
And you have to teach the fundamentals. Otherwise, they'll be buoyed and influenced so much by the social media and digital aspect of everything that it goes back to foundation again, what you said.
That's right.
Wow. Well, I do want to switch gears a little bit. Something that I've heard on a couple different talks that you've given, and I really love it. I want you to share it with our audience. Tell us about your 6-month filter.
Oh, yeah. So a while, and it's kind of interesting because I get asked this a lot, especially on this journey. I had kind of a couple different rock bottom experiences. One in particular, right around 2002, 2003, that I really felt God opened my eyes to the bigger why in relationships and my family, and kind of in concentric circles out from there. But also, I had been running so hard in trying to climb the ladder in business and sports and everything else like that. And I had kind of run myself to a point of physical exhaustion. And so I had some battles with a number of just different physical ailments. And there were a couple things when I was actually having a lot of problems with my esophagus. And so there were a couple times where they were taking pictures, they're doing upper GI and scans, and couldn't find anything. And what I share with people is during that time, I remember actually during a couple of different times going in, getting the test, and then you have to wait for the results.
Right.
So you got to drive home, and I remember, I'd go home, because that whole ride home, I would be thinking to myself, what are they going to find? What if I get the news? Yeah. What if they tell me I only have 6 months to live? How would I handle that? And I remember thinking, I would go home after those moments, and for those next few days, that would be more on the top of my mind. And I would treat my wife different. And I would be more apt to, like, my daughter was little at the time, she'd come in and be like, Daddy, she'd come into my office when it was at home, and she said, Daddy, come and tickle me. Well, I don't really feel like it right now. I got to finish this.
Right.
During that time, I'd be like, I'm going to go tickle you, and so it really, I went through that a couple different times where I had to wait on the results and get the results back. And, I think probably it was the second time where I was just kind of reflecting on, man, why did you change during that time, Todd? And what happened, I feel like God kind of knocked me upside the head and was like, Todd, you're acting like you only have 6 months to live. What if you get the news? Why don't you act like that all the time?
Right.
because none of us can live like we're going to die tomorrow. Some people will say that, and I'm like, that's impossible. I mean, like, I'm not going to be doing this interview. I'm not going to be visiting,
Yeah.
Doing any speeches. I'm going to be home in my house with my family, my closest, but if I had 6 months to live, I would go do this event. I would go spend time with this team and pour into them. And how much richer would that experience even be if I can walk that way? Because I go, hey, I may not ever see these people again.
Wow.
This may be the last opportunity that they get exposed to the light that's in me and what I feel I'm supposed to share with them. So I just really, that started to be my filter for priorities. And people say, how do you decide what events to do, where to go, I really have tried to follow closely with, I've missed a ton of events and really even put myself into some financial struggles because I've been like, I'm going to go coach my son here, and I'm not going to go do this event. It's just the way it is. And, I don't have regrets on all those opportunities and all those experiences. So, and you have to, there's a balance there. There's things that you have to, you really got to go, okay, pray about this. And am I supposed to go to this? But that 6-month filter is a big time part of how I make my decisions and set my priorities. So
I think that's awesome. I think that could be a book all on its own right there, teaching people, how important your priorities. And the good thing about that is when you discern on that and you pray on it, you can feel good about, when's the next time I'm going to be able to coach my son again? You don't know.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. There's always going to be another talk that you can give, another, conference or something you can speak at, hopefully anyway, right? Yeah. But you're never going to be in that moment at that time to be able to coach you. That's great. I love that. So
I tell people all the time, and you might get mad at me for saying this, but I tell people all the time, like, I may not be able to retire till I'm 80 because of that philosophy.
Right.
Because I'm certainly not, it's not been like this, I should say, in
Right.
terms of, but at the same time, my son, he's celebrating his 20th birthday today. And I look back on my life with him, and, something should happen to me tomorrow, I can put I would rest my head easy on the pillow, knowing that, he knew. And same with my daughter, who's 16, and we have a little boy that we adopted from Haiti that's 9. And I want all those kids. I feel peace now that they could say that. They would say that.
Yeah.
That their dad kept them front center of the heart, and my wife too, of course. So
that's awesome. That's great. That's awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to share that you feel compelled to share with our viewers or anything right now?
Man, I think you've gotten the main things out of me. I think, just even from a timing standpoint, this interview, we're doing this at just an absolutely crazy time in the world right now.
And leadership's important right now.
No doubt. And really, as much as anything else, being able to walk in peace and joy and in the midst of our circumstances. And I think, now more than ever, this, the test of our hearts, where our hearts really are, what our foundation is really on. I mean, it's very, very true. So, I walk through this with a lot of peace. I think we're gonna be just fine. But it's crazy times, and I know a lot of people they are struggling. So my encouragement would just be, to really take this time to reflect on what is your true foundation.
Yeah.
And where are you putting your ultimate rest and peace in? And, for me, obviously, as I've already shared, my faith is everything. And I just don't know what I would do during this time if I didn't have that ultimate peace and knowing that I know who's in control. We're going to be just fine, no matter what.
Awesome.
So,
great. Yeah, I love that. And so that's a great piece. And you can take this 2 different ways right now. That's for sure. And you can really come out ahead. If you wanted to lose weight, if you wanted to learn more, if you wanted to pick up a new talent, there's a lot of stuff you can do right now that you may not have had time for before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so true. So true. And I mean, it's crazy. It's, March was a long month.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. March was a long month. I haven't talked to anybody. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of it was, we've had more opportunities to reflect. I just actually did a Zoom call this morning with the administration for a Power 5 school. And, one of the things I challenged them with is quiet time in the morning. How are you starting your day?
Yeah.
For me, I protect that time like crazy.
Yep.
I want that to be, it is a really important time for me to personally, to be quiet, to pray, to get into the word and things like that. So I just can't encourage people enough. I mean, you have that more people, I mean, like not everybody, but the vast majority, they got a little bit more time in the morning right now.
Yeah.
If they want it.
Yeah.
If they really want it. And it's hard to use it to slow down and just reflect. But I think it's so important. I think that's part of what's maybe we're being called to as a country. So,
yeah. Look at what message we want to put in and what message we want to take from it, and not just taking all garbage, maybe taking some positivity and change, that we can really do something different with our lives.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Totally.
So how can people get a hold of you, Todd? What's the best way?
Well, obviously, I mean, I'm on, on the heels of our conversation about social media. You can find Todd Gongwer on Twitter and Instagram, and Twitter's probably where I communicate the most, and of course, Facebook. There's a Lead for God's Sake page on Facebook, and then I have a couple personal ones too. So, but that way, email is probably one of the best ways, just so that we are not as reliant on the social media platforms that are out there these days. Yeah. So I'm at my company is Cardia Transformation Group.
Okay.
And it's actually Cardia, T as in Todd, G as in Gongwer. Cardia, KARDIATG.com. And it's just Todd at Cardia, I should say. So pretty simple. But that's a great one too, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly. So.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it. As always, it's great to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
Hey man, it was a pleasure talking to you. Appreciate you having me on, and I'll wish you all the best, Dennis. Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thank you. You too. And for anybody who hasn't read it yet, pick it up. Lead for God's Sake. I promise you will not be disappointed. Please do pick it up, and we'll probably put a link underneath this video to where you can get to Todd's site and order some of those. So thank you everyone for watching. All right. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Dennis.